our Chief Deputy, Dan Ray, at the Delta Stewardship Council, giving us some highlights of what's included in the Delta Plan. Dan?
Thanks, Randy. Can I get my PowerPoint up? How are we doing back there, guys? Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about the Delta Plan, and when I'm done, I hope you'll see both how the plan builds on reports and plans and initiatives of your agencies to create what we hope is a single coordinated blueprint for the Delta, and that we'll also be able to recognize some opportunities for us all to work together to accomplish more than we could on our own to protect this important area that we all value, whether we live there or it's part of our water systems or important to our state and nation. You know, the Delta Plan is all about co-equal goals. As Secretary Laird said, the goal of providing a more reliable water supply for the state and protecting and restoring the Delta ecosystem. And there's a third leg, too, to this, and that's protecting the unique values of the Delta as a place, its agriculture, its recreation opportunities, its cultural resources. Protecting them not in a museum that's preserved in amber or is some fortress that's going to resist change, but as a place that's adapting to the changes, successfully adapting to those that are going to affect it. You know, the Delta Plan was created as a way to guide and coordinate the major actions that we're doing in the region. And so that's why it builds on the other plans and reports that were produced by the agencies around this table. So its water supply recommendations are primarily informed by the California Water Plan. Its ecosystem restoration provisions come largely from Fish and Wildlife's Delta Ecosystem Restoration Strategy to evaluate activities that affect flows or water quality. It relies on the Water Board's Bay Delta Plan and on the basin plans and the TMDLs that the regional boards have developed. Its chapter on the Delta as a place is based largely on the recommendations of the Delta Protection Commission's Economic Sustainability Plan. I think 2/3 of the recommendations that were in the Economic Sustainability Plan were adopted either in whole or part in the Delta Plan. And its risk management provisions build on the recommendations of the 5 counties emergency management agencies and intended to encourage the compatibility with the state plan of flood control and the disaster recovery programs of the Corps of Engineers. You know, throughout the Delta Plan, we met regularly with state and federal and local agencies, and more than 250 individuals and other organizations also provided input to the plan. So it reflects a lot of different people's points of view. It's got 73 non-binding recommendations, and its sparse regulatory framework has only 14 policies. I'd like to remind myself that's barely more than Moses brought down from the mountain, and he didn't need definitions.
And there were no footnotes.
That's right, yeah. At least not in the initial version, yeah. The regulations are the regulations are intended to complement the recommendations. The regulatory policies fill key gaps in existing state and federal regulatory programs to make sure that we don't have holes that could frustrate our intentions to further the co-equal goals. We hope the Delta Plan sets a unified direction for management of the Delta with a mix of near and long-term actions. It highlights things that should be done right away and then uses regulations to restrict actions that could harm our ability to pursue longer-term solutions. State and local agencies are required to comply with the regulatory policies by certifying that there are actions in the Delta that might significantly affect achievement of the co-equal goals or affect a government-sponsored flood control program, to certify that those actions are consistent with the Delta Plan. And the legislation instructs us to seek federal approval of the Delta Plan as well as an amendment to our state's coastal zone management program, so that then the responsibility for consistency with the Delta Plan would extend to federal agencies. The plan includes performance measures so we can track progress towards the goals. And our independent science board reviewed it several times to make sure we were using the best available science, so we know we're on the right track there. And the calls in the legislation for the plan to be reviewed every 5 years to make sure it stays up to date. In terms of a water supply reliability, the plan's objective is to increase reliability by better matching the state's demands for water to the available supply, consistent with our goals of protecting the ecosystem and other beneficial uses. Hopes to do that in large part by building on the great integrated regional water management work that's been done, the recycling programs, the water use efficiency programs that are supported by DWR and the Bureau and the U.S. Department of Agriculture and local water users so that we can increase regional self-reliance in water supplies. It calls the Water Actions Plan's call to make conservation a way of life is a great building block that contributes to the fundamental framework on which our plan builds. And we've got a regulatory policy in the plan that complements those initiatives by requiring that agencies that come to take water out of the Delta in a way that damages the environment have to verify that they're in compliance with the rules about improving water use efficiency and carrying out their local integrated regional water management plans. The Delta Plan endorses and builds on the Water Action Plan's call for improved groundwater management so we can better better use our surface water supplies withdrawn from the Delta in conjunction with well-managed groundwater. Completing the studies that the Bureau and DWR are doing on storage, complementing the evaluation that the Water Commission is doing of smaller storage opportunities is the path the plan recommends to improve storage. To improve conveyance, it calls for prompt completion of the BDCP. In terms of ecosystem, as I said, there's a lot of great work that's been done over the last decades. Some of it painful by those of you who've been involved in the endangered species process. But it created a great framework for us to build on, and the good works of the CVPIA and the CalFed program, Bureau, the FERC work and others have done a lot to improve habitats above the Delta. And restoration of salt ponds in San Francisco Bay is making a lot of progress in restoring the estuary below the Delta. The conservation strategy that Fish and Wildlife has been developing for the Delta and the Central Valley gave us a clear direction about things that we should be doing within the Delta itself, things about which there's a lot of consensus among the resource managers, so that provided a lot of the framework we built on. Again, we're relying on the Water Board to help restore more natural flows in conjunction with activities on the BDCP. And our Delta Science program is providing a lot of support for the Water Board's work. To make near-term progress while the BDCP is being developed, the plan encourages restoring tidal marsh and floodplains in the 6 high-priority areas in Delta and Sassoon Marsh, where the Fish and Wildlife Restoration Program Fish Restoration Program Agreement agencies are already working. Yola Bypass, Cache Slough, some McCulmy Confluence, the lower San Joaquin River floodplain, the Sassoon Marsh, and some of the islands in the western Delta. To improve riverside fish habitat, the Delta Plan recommends setting back levees along the McCulmy and the San Joaquin and the Sacramento rivers and the Sacramento's distributaries. This is one of the ways in which the plan helps complement the recommendations of the Central Valley Flood Board's plan in terms of integrating flood management and ecosystem restoration needs. And there's other recommendations regarding other stressors and actions to control invasive species and other stressors on the Delta. Now, to protect and preserve the unique values of the Delta, a key thing we're recommending in the plan is protecting rural lands for agriculture by locating new urban development in the areas that are already planned for development in cities and their spheres of influence rather than converting yet more rural farmlands for development. The Delta Protection Commission's the first line of defense for these farmlands in the primary zone. And in the secondary zone, the Delta plans and regulations will ensure that urban development doesn't continue to sprawl out needlessly across flood-prone farmlands, but it's located in the ample areas that local governments have already planned for development. Another Delta Plan provision that protects farmlands encourages public agencies to site projects on existing publicly owned lands if that's possible before acquiring farmlands, to buy land from willing sellers where that's available before they consider condemnation of private lands, and requires that care be used to minimize conflicts with adjoining properties and with local land use plans. There's also a recommendation to designate the Delta as a national heritage area so that we could take advantage of that National Park Service program to help acknowledge that the Delta is a special place and build a little more appreciation of its recreation and heritage opportunities. The plan encourages recreation and tourism in the Delta. A lot of parks, wildlife areas, roadways down there whose use contributes over $300 million to the region's economy annually. Now, we all know the Delta is an inherently flood-prone place, and so the plan includes a variety of provisions to address flood risk reduction. DWR, with the help of a lot of local reclamation districts and occasionally the Corps of Engineers, has been making great efforts to improve the Delta levees to reduce flood risks. But the challenge is really greater than the funds that are available. And so the plan recommends interim priorities for state investment in Delta levees. But as we'll be discussing later, the study to update these priorities is going to be launched soon. To improve flood preparedness and find another source for funding risk reduction activities, another source of funding. The plan recommends, as does the Water Action Plan, creating a Delta Risk Assessment District that would make sure that all those who benefit from the Delta's levee system are contributing to improving its effectiveness. The plan also calls for protecting currently unregulated floodways in the Delta from encroachments that might reduce their conveyance capacity. To make use of the best available science, the Delta Plan relies on the adaptive management program to evaluate how well the programs are working and monitor their results, find improvements where necessary, called for completion of the Delta Science Plan, and we're fortunate that we had the work of that independent science board to help us out. Convening this committee of agencies whose cooperation can help implementing the plan is another of its recommendations. It's also endorsed in the Water Action Plan. The agencies in this room and their state and federal counterparts annually are spending about $350 million to address the Delta's problems, according to our most recent cross-cut budget that we prepare pursuant to the Federal Water Supply Reliability and Environmental Improvement Act. And to help us better track our agency's activities, we're in the process of repurposing the cross-cut budget software that we inherited from the old CalFed program so that we can use it to track implementation of the Delta Plan as well. Over the coming months, we hope to be in touch with your agencies to make sure the new tracking system responds to your needs. And we're also going to reach out to you to see what data you may be collecting that would be helpful to us as we try to firm up performance measures to evaluate the progress in meeting the Delta Plan's objectives. So that's my report, and I want to thank you very much for your time.
Dan, thanks for that report. Why don't you stick around at the microphone in case there are any specific questions for you.